You smile at strangers. You trust your neighbor. But what if the real monster isn't lurking in the dark? It's standing right beside you, holding the door open. Welcome to the side of humanity we're terrified to admit exists. Let's dive in. Have you ever looked around a crowded room, maybe on the train or in a coffee shop line, and felt a tiny, irrational shiver? A fleeting thought that maybe, just maybe, the person smiling politely next to you isn't who they appear to be. It's a deeply unsettling notion, isn't it? The idea that true darkness, the kind that fuels nightmares and horrific headlines, might not always lurk in shadowy alleys or distant, monstrous figures. Sometimes, it wears a familiar face. It borrows sugar, coaches Little League, chairs the PTA. It walks among us, hidden behind the most ordinary, impenetrable veil, normalcy. This is the chilling reality that underpins so much of our collective fascination and horror with the extremes of human evil. We're drawn to these stories, perhaps, because they tap into a primal fear. If someone capable of unspeakable acts can look just like us, talk like us, live like us, what does that say about the world? About the flimsy nature of the social fabric we trust? It's a terrifying thought. Now, let's be clear. What follows isn't a dry, factual recounting of infamous crimes or a clinical dissection of named serial killers. You won't find names you recognize from documentaries here, nor precise timelines ripped from case files. Instead, this is an exercise in creative writing, a journey into dark fiction inspired by the shadows of those real-world horrors. Think of it as holding a dark mirror up to reality. We're using the tools of narrative, character, setting, conflict, drama, to explore the why and the how. How does such profound darkness take root in a human soul? What does the devastating impact look like, not just in statistics, but in the shattered lives left behind? We'll delve into the murky waters of psychological exploration, trying to grasp, through fiction, the motivations and machinations that drive individuals to commit acts that defy easy comprehension. Why explore such grim territory through fiction? Because sometimes, narrative allows us to approach truths that are too stark, too overwhelming, to confront directly. It gives us a framework to grapple with the concept of the mask of sanity, that chillingly effective camouflage worn by those who harbor monstrous secrets. It lets us probe the uncomfortable questions without pretending to have all the answers. So, consider this your invitation to step beyond the veil. Over the course of this exploration, we'll encounter different fictional scenarios, each a distinct echo of real-world darkness. We'll meet characters who embody different facets of human evil, the manipulator, the zealot, the seemingly ordinary neighbor with unthinkable secrets. Through their stories, crafted with dramatic tension and psychological depth, we hope to gain, well, maybe not understanding, because some acts defy it, but perhaps a deeper, more unsettling awareness. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the faces we see every day. Perhaps the most unsettling monster is the one who knows our name, shares our sidewalk, the one hiding right next door. Let's begin there, shall we? Let's begin there, shall we? Right next door, in a town like countless others, nestled comfortably amidst rolling hills and whispering trees. Maple Creek. Sounds idyllic, doesn't it? And for the most part, it was. White picket fences lined streets named after trees, the scent of freshly baked bread often wafted from the open window of Miller's Bakery, and neighbors still waved hello. Trust wasn't just a word here, it was the mortar holding the community together. And at the very heart of that community stood Arthur Pendleton. Arthur. Not officially the mayor, no, but everyone called him that anyway. Maybe unofficial mayor fits better. He owned Pendleton's Hardware, the kind of place that smelled of sawdust and possibility, where Arthur knew every customer by name and probably their dog's name too. Need a specific bolt? Arthur had it. Lawnmower acting up? Arthur would tinker with it himself after hours. He organized the Founders' Day picnic every year, flipped pancakes at the firemen's breakfast, and even dressed up, rather convincingly, people chuckled, as Santa Claus for the children at Christmas. Always ready with a warm smile, a firm handshake, a joke that could lighten any mood. He was, in the eyes of Maple Creek, simply good. A pillar. Solid. Reliable. The kind of man you felt lucky to have in your town. A true community leader. But even in idyllic Maple Creek, shadows could lengthen. Whispers started, quiet at first, easily dismissed. Young men, mostly drifters or those known to be a bit troubled, passing through town, they'd vanish. Poof. Gone. Headed west for work, someone might say. Probably just ran off, another would shrug. It happened infrequently enough that no one connected the dots. Why would they? This was Maple Creek. Bad things happened elsewhere. Still, sometimes, Arthur would say something odd. A joke with a slightly cruel edge, quickly smoothed over with that famous chuckle. A momentary coldness in his eyes during a town meeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. Tiny fissures in the flawless facade, unnoticed by most. Or perhaps, willfully ignored. Because confronting the alternative was unthinkable. The deception was just too complete. Then came Detective Harding. Transferred from the city after a messy case, Harding carried a weariness that didn't quite fit Maple Creek's relentless optimism. He wasn't charmed by Arthur Pendleton. He saw the easy smiles and felt something else. Something practiced. He started looking at the old missing persons reports, the ones everyone else had filed away. He noticed a pattern the local sheriff, Arthur's fishing buddy, naturally had missed. Or hadn't wanted to see. The disappearances always seemed to follow a town event where Arthur had been particularly visible, particularly charming. Coincidence? Harding didn't believe in them much anymore. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Harding," Chief Miller had grumbled, sipping coffee in his office. "Arthur? He is Maple Creek. Helped build the new wing on the library himself. You're wasting your time." But Harding persisted. He'd re-interviewed families, dug into Arthur's past, spent late nights staring at maps, marking locations. He felt the invisible walls of the town closing in, protecting its favorite son. The pressure was immense. He even saw Arthur watching him sometimes, that familiar friendly smile now looking like something else entirely. A challenge? A warning? It was maddening. This charming psychopath, walking around, shaking hands, while Harding felt the hidden evil pulsing just beneath the surface. The break, when it came, was mundane. Almost insulting in its simplicity after all Harding's work. A plumbing emergency at the Pendleton residence. Old pipes, finally giving way after decades. The plumbers needed to dig near the foundation, down into the crawlspace beneath the perfectly manicured lawn Arthur was so proud of. They hit something that wasn't pipe or rock. Something soft. Wrapped in plastic. Then another. And another. The news hit Maple Creek like a physical blow. Disbelief. Shock. Then, a dawning, sickening horror. Arthur Pendleton. Their Arthur. The pancake flipper, the Santa Claus, the helpful hardware store owner. The crawlspace beneath his home, that symbol of small-town tidiness, yielded horrors that twisted the picturesque image of Maple Creek into a grotesque nightmare. The investigation uncovered a secret history written in bone and decay, a chilling testament to how effectively the mask of sanity could hide the most profound monstrosity. The revelation shattered Maple Creek, leaving residents adrift in a sea of betrayal, forever questioning how darkness could fester so completely, so quietly, right under their noses, hidden behind the most trusted smile in town. While some killers, like Arthur, meticulously craft a life to hide within, others don't bother with the facade. They are predators out in the open, actively stalking their prey, using trust itself as their most potent weapon. While some killers, like Arthur Pendleton, meticulously craft a life to hide within, others don't bother with the elaborate facade. They are predators out in the open, actively stalking their prey, using trust itself, or the illusion of it, as their most potent weapon. They operate in the liminal spaces, the lonely stretches of highway under indifferent stars, the flickering fluorescent lights of desolate rest stops, preying on vulnerability wherever they find it. Meet Silas Vance. Or whatever name he's using this week. Silas didn't look like a monster. That was his greatest advantage. Mid-40s, maybe? Nondescript brown hair, average height, clothes that blended into any background. He favored slightly worn work shirts, sturdy boots. Sometimes, a security guard's windbreaker lay casually tossed on the passenger seat of his unremarkable, slightly muddy sedan, a prop easily added or removed. Other times, it was a clipboard with official-looking, but utterly fake, forms. He cultivated an air of weary helpfulness, the kind of guy who'd stop for a stranded motorist because it was the right thing to do. His smile was practiced, readily deployed, designed to disarm. It rarely reached his eyes. His hunting ground was the ribbon of asphalt stretching across the plains, particularly the sections notorious for spotty cell service and miles between exits. He looked for the telltale signs: a car pulled onto the shoulder, hood up, hazard lights blinking a desperate rhythm in the darkness. A lone figure huddled inside against the cold. A young backpacker thumbing for a ride at an isolated on-ramp. Vulnerability was his cue. Take Elena. Cross-country trip, chasing a new start. Her beat-up hatchback chose the middle of nowhere, somewhere between exit 112 and God knows where, to finally give up the ghost with a pathetic cough and a plume of steam. Panic tightened her chest. No bars on her phone. Just the oppressive silence of the prairie night and the distant whine of semis barreling past, indifferent. Then, headlights slowed, pulling onto the shoulder behind her. Hope flickered, quickly followed by a jolt of caution. A lone woman, a strange man, clichés existed for a reason. But what choice did she have? He stepped out, leaving his car door slightly ajar. Silas. Evening, he called out, voice calm, reasonable. Car trouble? Elena nodded, trying to appear less scared than she felt. Engine just died. And my phone's useless out here. Silas clicked his tongue sympathetically. Yeah, nasty dead zone through here. Happens all the time. He ambled closer, hands visible, projecting non-threat. Maybe he noticed the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted towards the empty road. Perfect. Look, the next town with a proper garage is maybe 20 miles up. I'm headed that way anyway. Happy to give you a lift, get you somewhere safe. He offered that smile. It seemed genuine enough. Didn't it? Inside Silas, the familiar thrum started. The assessment. Yum, alone, clearly distressed. Stranded. The internal checklist ticked over. The thrill wasn't just in the act itself, but in the intricate dance of manipulation leading up to it. This predatory killer wasn't driven by explosive rage. This was a calculated game, a hunt. He relished the power dynamic, the slow erosion of caution, the moment trust, however tentative, was offered. It was an addiction, the quiet assertion of control over another life. He imagined the conversation, the gradual shift from rescuer to captor, savoring each stage. Elena hesitated for only a moment. The cold was seeping in, the darkness felt vast. Okay, she breathed, relief warring with a persistent nod of unease. Thank you. Really? As she gathered her purse, Silas casually mentioned, used to do roadside assistance part-time. Seen this 100 times. Another small lie, another brick in the wall of false security. Abuse of trust was his specialty. The investigation into figures like Silas Vance is a nightmare. Victims often have transient lifestyles or are far from home, the disappearances reported late, if at all. Jurisdictional boundaries blur cases. Evidence is scarce on those lonely roads. Silas knew this. He was meticulous in his own way, choosing spots with no cameras, wiping down surfaces, varying his routes, changing minor details of his appearance. He was a ghost, leaving behind only heartbroken families and frustrated detectives staring at pins scattered across a map, sensing a pattern they couldn't quite prove belonged to one highway killer. Inside Silas's car, the air grew thick. The initial relief Elena felt began to curdle. The small talk felt forced now, his questions a little too probing. Where was she headed? Why alone? Was anyone expecting her? He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, a repetitive, unnerving rhythm. She glanced sideways. Was that rope coiled on the floor mat? Or just jumper cables? Her heart hammered. They passed a sign, next service is 15 miles. It felt like a death sentence. Then, flashing lights appeared in the rearview mirror, a state trooper. Hope surged. But Silas just smoothly pulled over to the shoulder, rolled down his window, and gave the officer a nod and that easy smile. "Everything okay, officer?" he asked, projecting pure innocence. The trooper waved him on. Elena remained frozen, the scream caught in her throat. A missed chance. The facade held. For now. The game continued, the power firmly in Silas's hands, the hunter pleased with his performance. Whether Elena becomes another pin on a detective's map or finds a desperate and probable escape, the chilling truth remains: Silas, or someone like him, is still out there, cruising the lonely highways, wearing a smile, waiting for the next opportunity. Silas Vance was a phantom, his smile a mask for the predator within, a stark reminder of vulnerability. But not all darkness is cold and calculated. Sometimes, it doesn't stalk or lure, it simply erupts, a sudden, inexplicable frenzy of violence. Silas Vance, or someone like him, is still out there, cruising the lonely highways, wearing a smile, waiting for the next opportunity. But not all darkness is cold and calculated. Sometimes, it doesn't stalk or lure with practiced charm, it simply erupts, a sudden, inexplicable frenzy of violence, like a pressure cooker left on the heat too long. The levee breaks, and chaos floods the ordinary world. Consider Marcus Storen. If you even noticed him at all. He was background noise in the symphony of life. Worked the night shift restocking shelves at the Megamart on the edge of town, lived alone in a small, meticulously tidy apartment on the 3rd floor of the Oakwood complex. His neighbors knew him mostly as a quiet presence, a polite nod in the hallway, never any trouble. Kept to himself, they'd say later, searching for adjectives that now felt horribly inadequate. Maybe invisible was closer to the truth. He collected stamps, ordered groceries online, and his television was usually tuned to nature documentaries. Nothing remarkable. Nothing to suggest the storm gathering behind his blank, watchful eyes. What was the trigger? That's the question everyone asks afterwards, desperate for a reason, a neat box to put the horror in. But sometimes, there isn't one. Not one single, identifiable cause, anyway. Maybe it was the layoff notice he found slipped under his door that morning, another casualty of corporate restructuring. Maybe it was the condescending laugh from the teenagers hanging out by the dumpster as he walked home, shoulders slumped against the pre-dawn chill. Or maybe it was something deeper, slower, a lifetime of perceived slights, of feeling overlooked, of resentment simmering beneath that quiet exterior until it reached a boiling point only he could feel. Perhaps it was a sudden, terrifying break from reality itself, a switch flipping in his brain, plunging him into a world where his actions made a terrifying kind of sense only to him. We'll never know for sure. The why often remains infuriatingly ambiguous, lost in the wreckage. All we know is that one gray Tuesday afternoon, something inside Marcus Storen snapped. The change was terrifyingly swift. One moment he was staring numbly at the peeling paint on his kitchen wall, the next a cold clarity settled over him. A purpose. He moved with an unfamiliar decisiveness, retrieving the heavy object wrapped in an old blanket from the back of his closet. His movements were precise, almost robotic. He walked out of his apartment, not bothering to lock the door. The hallway was empty, echoing with the distant hum of the building. Then, Mrs. Henderson from 3B opened her door, pulling her small terrier out for its afternoon walk. She offered Marcus her usual weary smile. "Afternoon, Mar." The rest was lost in a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Doors slammed open, then slammed shut again. A scream, cut short. Another. Marcus moved down the hallway, then the stairs, a force of random destruction unleashed within the mundane walls of the Oakwood apartments. Fast. Brutal. Senseless. Panic became the soundtrack. People scrambled, hid, tried to make sense of the impossible. Young Sarah, babysitting in 2F, shoved the terrified toddler into a closet, whispering frantic reassurances while her own body trembled uncontrollably. Old Mr. Gable, slow on his feet, fumbled with his deadbolt, his breath catching in ragged gasps as the heavy footsteps grew louder in the corridor outside. A delivery driver, unlucky enough to be bringing a pizza to the wrong building at the wrong time, found himself face to face with a nightmare he couldn't outrun. There was no pattern, no specific targets, just pure, unadulterated rampage. The air filled with the coppery tang of fear and something else, something acrid and final. Intense descriptions failed to capture the sheer, disorienting terror of being caught in such a whirlwind. It's over before you can process it. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant, approaching wail of sirens. The aftermath was a tableau of shock and devastation. Flashing red and blue lights painted the drab brick walls of the Oakwood. Residents huddled together on the lawn, wrapped in blankets, eyes wide with disbelief. Neighbors who had exchanged polite nods hours earlier now stared at each other, searching for answers that weren't there. "He was always so quiet," became the bewildered refrain, a testament to how little they truly knew, how little anyone knew, about the pressures building behind a closed door. The scene was one of confusion, of shattered normalcy. There was no grand statement, no explanation scrawled on a wall. Just the quiet man, the sudden explosion, and the devastating impact of violence that seemed to come from nowhere and signify nothing but loss. The storm passed, leaving behind wreckage and questions that might never be answered, a terrifying glimpse into the fragility of control, the suddenness with which the ordinary can shatter. While some are lost to sudden, inexplicable rage, others killed according to a different kind of script entirely, one dictated by a twisted internal logic. A bizarre set of beliefs incomprehensible to the outside world, dictated by a twisted internal script, a bizarre set of beliefs incomprehensible to the outside world. Welcome to the chilling domain where murder becomes a sacrament, performed not out of rage or lust as typically conceived, but out of a deeply ingrained, disturbingly sincere, and utterly warped conviction. Here, the killer is often a servant to their own delusion. Deep in the bayou country, where Spanish moss dripped like secrets from ancient cypress trees and the air hummed thick with the scent of decay and honeysuckle, lived a man known only as Master Elias. Few people ever saw him. His cabin was deliberately isolated, reachable only by a winding dirt track that often flooded, swallowed by the swamp on either side. Those who caught a rare glimpse described a gaunt figure with eyes that seemed too bright, too intense, dressed in simple, homespun clothes. He sometimes left bundles of strange herbs and carved wooden talismans at the edge of the nearest village, offerings accepted with a mixture of fear and wary respect. He was the local boogeyman, the hermit, the practitioner of old ways best left undisturbed, a figure woven into the fabric of local folk belief. But Elias saw himself differently. He wasn't merely a recluse, he was the chosen conduit, the sole interpreter of the whispering serpent, an ancient entity, he believed, that spoke to him in the rustling leaves and the croaking of frogs, demanding sacrifice to restore balance to the corrupted land. This wasn't madness to Elias, it was divine instruction, a sacred mission. The serpent, his internal sermons told him, required specific offerings, individuals untouched by the cynicism of the modern world, often young women, identified by subtle signs. A particular birthmark, the color of their eyes matching the swamp water at dusk, or perhaps they'd unknowingly picked up one of the marked shells Elias scattered along the paths leading into his domain. His methods were insidious, playing on superstition and desperation. A young woman seeking a cure for her mother's lingering illness might hear whispers of the hermit in the swamp who possessed ancient knowledge. A traveler lost on the back roads might stumble upon his cabin, drawn by the flickering lamplight, and be offered shelter and cryptic advice. Elias would speak of the serpent, of purification, of appeasing the old spirits of the bayou. His voice was calm, hypnotic, weaving a narrative where fear morphed into a strange kind of reverence. He didn't chorus with force. Initially, he lured with the promise of forbidden answers, of mystical intervention. The rituals themselves were performed in a hidden clearing, deep within the swamp, accessible only to Elias. An altar of mud and bone stood beneath a gnarled cypress, adorned with feathers, strange symbols daubed in ochre, and offerings of swamp lilies. Here, under the oppressive humidity and the watchful eyes of unseen creatures, Elias performed the serpent's work. The details were grotesque, a perversion of any recognizable faith. Each action, however horrific to an outside observer, held profound significance within his delusional motive. He chanted words in a language only he understood, believing he was channeling the serpent's power, purifying the offering, strengthening his connection to the entity. In his mind, these were not murders, they were necessary transactions, holy work carried out with solemn purpose. He felt the serpent's pleasure, a cold ecstasy that validated his twisted beliefs. The stark contrast between his internal justification, this sense of sacred duty, and the brutal, horrifying reality of his actions was absolute, a chasm of incomprehension. For Deputy Miller, assigned the thankless task of investigating the periodic disappearances that plagued the parishes bordering the swamp, the Elias case was a descent into folk horror made real. The few bodies recovered were found in bizarre circumstances, marked with symbols that meant nothing to forensic pathologists, stripped of identification, seemingly consumed by the swamp itself. There were no witnesses, no conventional motives, no robbery, no signs of typical assault. Just the unsettling whispers about the hermit, the swamp claiming its own, stories Miller initially dismissed as backwoods superstition. But the disappearances continued, always young women, always near the swamp's edge. He felt hamstrung by logic in a case that seemed to defy it, facing a wall of silence from locals too afraid or too steeped in their own beliefs to speak against Master Elias. The investigation stalled, mired in the eerie atmosphere of the bayou and the sheer strangeness of the sparse clues. The breakthrough came not from deduction, but from desperation. A young woman, lured towards the cabin by Elias's promise of a potent love charm, felt a sudden, primal fear clutch her heart. Something in his eyes, and the unnatural stillness of the air around his cabin, she turned and ran, blindly, stumbling through the swamp until she collapsed on the highway, babbling a near incoherent story to a passing trucker. Her terror was real, visceral. It was enough for Miller to finally push for a search warrant, battling the skepticism of his superiors. He led a small team down the winding track, the air growing heavier with each step. They found the cabin empty, unnervingly neat, jars of herbs lining the shelves. But it was the hidden clearing, discovered almost by accident by an officer following a barely visible trail, that revealed the truth. The crude altar, the stains, the scattered bones half buried in the mud, the chilling collection of personal trinkets arranged in bizarre patterns, it was a scene of ritualistic killer madness laid bare. Elias was gone, vanished back into the swamp he claimed to serve, leaving behind only the evidence of his twisted creed. For Master Elias, the killings were a sacred duty. For the world, they were an unfathomable nightmare, a terrifying glimpse into a reality governed by rules utterly alien to our own. Reflecting on such cases leaves one cold, grappling with the unsettling idea that belief itself can become the most dangerous weapon. Yet, even this profound, ritualistic darkness, this dedication to a singular, warped mission, can be overshadowed by another kind of horror, the horror of sheer, almost industrial scale, where the taking of life becomes sickeningly commonplace, the numbers mounting into an abyss that numbs the mind, leaving behind only the evidence of his twisted creed, a chilling testament to a reality governed by rules utterly alien to our own. Yet, even this profound, ritualistic darkness, this dedication to a singular, warped mission, can be overshadowed by another kind of horror, the horror of sheer, almost industrial scale, where the taking of life becomes sickeningly commonplace, the numbers mounting into an abyss that numbs the mind and crushes the spirit. This is the realm of the collector. Special Agent Frank Riley knew the weight of those numbers. It settled on his shoulders every morning when he walked into his cramped office, a space dominated not by decoration, but by rows upon rows of battered cardboard boxes. Each box bore the name of a state: Arizona, California, Texas, Nevada, Oklahoma, stretching back into the hazy gloom of the 1970s. Inside were the files, the ghosts. Cold cases, mostly. Unidentified women, often found in desolate places, discarded like trash along highways, and shallow graves in the desert scrub, were tangled in the reeds of forgotten waterways. For nearly 30 years, Riley had chased a phantom, a killer the weary task force had grimly nicknamed the Nomad. The Nomad wasn't flashy. He didn't talk to police or leave elaborate clues like some fictional killer. His genius, if you could call it that, lay in his anonymity, his constant movement, and his choice of victims. He preyed on the periphery, on those society often overlooked or chose not to see. Runaways fleeing broken homes, sex workers trying to make ends meet on lonely truck stop routes, addicts adrift in a haze of desperation. These were marginalized victims, often with no one to immediately report them missing, their disappearances initially logged as isolated incidents, if logged at all. They were vulnerable, easy targets for a predator moving silently through the vast, interconnected network of American highways operating over a terrifyingly long time frame. For decades, the Nomad moved like smoke. Different jurisdictions rarely communicated effectively back then. DNA databases were science fiction. Links between cases, often separated by hundreds of miles and several years, relied on tenuous similarities in method, usually strangulation, and the gut feeling of overworked detectives like Riley, who saw faint echoes across state lines. How many times had local police pulled the Nomad over for speeding? Questioned him about a minor theft? Let him go because he seemed harmless, just another face passing through. Riley tried not to dwell on it. The what-ifs were corrosive. The sheer geographical spread was baffling, the timeline stretching across presidencies, technological advances, and Riley's own receding hairline. The investigation felt less like hunting a man and more like trying to map a devastating, slow-motion plague. Then, finally, a break. Not a dramatic shootout, but a routine arrest for something unrelated, decades after the killing began. And then, unexpectedly, the Nomad started talking. Not confessing in a torrent of guilt, but recollecting. Riley sat through hours of interviews, the transcripts now filling another box in his office. The killer's indifference was perhaps the most horrifying aspect of all. It wasn't malice, it was absence. Absence of empathy, remorse, connection. Subject, recalls incident, approximate. Summer 82, near Barstow, California. Victim, female hitchhiker, young, maybe 19 to 20. Dark hair. Subject's words, yeah, picked her up on the I-15. Talked a lot. Said she was going to see your sister or aunt. Can't recall. Nice night. Dropped her off out past the state line. Quiet place. Nobody ever found that one, I bet. No triumph, no regret. Just facts, delivered with the emotional weight of describing the weather. Riley read the words, the clinical detachment chilling him despite years on the job. Each casually recalled murder was another file to reopen, another family to potentially notify, another Jane Doe to try and identify. The scale of killing was immense, overwhelming. Dozens confirmed. Maybe over 100? The Nomad himself seemed unsure, having lost count long ago. They were just events. Stops along his endless, drifting journey. Collected moments of extinguishing lives. The focus shifted from hunting the killer to the monumental task of counting and identifying his victims. It became Riley's grim mission, a race against his own retirement clock. Poring over old files, requesting exhumations, utilizing new DNA technologies to match remains with missing persons reports from 30 years ago. Giving names back to the forgotten victims. Because behind the staggering number was the individual tragedy, multiplied endlessly. The young woman hoping for a new start. The runaway searching for belonging. Each one a life stolen, often leaving behind families trapped in decades of agonizing uncertainty. Justice, in any conventional sense, felt impossible. What sentence could possibly equate to such a vast harvest of death? The true weight wasn't just the evil of the killer, but the tragedy of so many lives erased, so many stories left unfinished. The final count was staggering, a monument to indifference and lost lives, leaving investigators like Riley haunted by the sheer scale, the chilling reality that such prolific evil could exist, often hidden in plain sight for so long, moving freely among us. Confronting these fictionalized echoes of real darkness, from the meticulously hidden to the explosively random, from the ritualistically driven to the numbingly prolific, raises difficult questions about the shadows we inhabit. Confronting these fictionalized echoes of real darkness, from the meticulously hidden community leader to the chillingly casual collector of lives, from the predator using charm as bait to the sudden eruption of senseless violence and the killer acting out a twisted, private scripture, well, it raises difficult questions, doesn't it? Stepping back from these narratives leaves us lingering in the shadows, pondering the landscapes of human evil we've just traversed. This journey, as stated from the outset, wasn't about meticulously documenting real atrocities or offering definitive profiles of actual serial killers. Those stories exist elsewhere, and factual accounts that serve their own crucial purpose. No, this was different. This was an exploration using the lens of creative writing, crafting stories inspired by the grim realities that haunt our history and headlines. We used fiction as a tool, a kind of dark mirror, to try and get closer to the unsettling how and why. How can a person wear such a convincing mask of sanity while hiding unimaginable depths of cruelty? Why does one individual explode in seemingly random violence, while another patiently, methodically hunts for decades? What does it feel like to be caught in their orbit, either as an investigator piecing together fragments or, terrifyingly, as someone targeted? These fictional scenarios aim to delve into the psychological currents, the societal vulnerabilities exploited, and the devastating human impact in ways that straightforward reporting sometimes cannot. Fiction allows for speculation, for internal monologue, for the dramatic tension that highlights the core themes at play. So, what's the purpose of such a dark exploration? Why willingly gaze into this abyss, even a fictionalized one? Perhaps it serves as a modern form of cautionary tale, reminding us of the potential for deception that exists beneath placid surfaces. Maybe understanding the patterns, the grooming, the manipulation, the exploitation of trust and societal blind spots offers some small measure of vigilance. We see threads, certainly. The chilling effectiveness of a hidden life, lived in plain sight. The targeting of the vulnerable, those on the margins whose society often fails to protect. The ripple effects of violence, extending far beyond the immediate victims. But noticing patterns isn't the same as finding easy answers. It's tempting, perhaps even comforting, to seek simple explanations for such extreme evil. To label it purely as madness or monstrosity and create distance. But the unsettling truth, reflected even in these fictional composites, is that the motivations are often complex, horrifyingly banal, or utterly incomprehensible. These stories offer no neat psychological boxes, no definitive solutions to the riddle of profound cruelty. The why often remains elusive, a void at the heart of the horror. And so, we're left with lingering questions, aren't we? Questions that perhaps fiction is uniquely suited to pose, even if it cannot answer them. How thin is the veneer of civilization? How vigilant must we be, and how do we balance that vigilance with trust and empathy? What responsibility do we bear for the societal conditions that allow some predators to operate undetected for so long? Can we truly ever know another person's depths? These aren't comfortable thoughts, but perhaps they are necessary ones. Ultimately, examining darkness through fiction provides a crucial, if unsettling, service. It allows us entry into terrifying possibilities from a position of relative safety. We can explore the abyss without falling in. We can confront the what-ifs within the controlled environment of a narrative. It's a reflection, however distorted, of a darkness that undeniably exists. And perhaps by looking into that dark mirror, by engaging with these true crime themes through creative exploration, we gain not answers, but a more profound, sobering awareness of the complexities of human nature, the fragility of life, and the enduring mystery of why some souls choose such devastating paths.